समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
In recent days, a single line from former Army Chief General Manoj Naravane's yet to be published memoir has triggered a political storm. On the night of 31st August 2020, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh reportedly told him, "Jo uchit samjho, wo karo. Do whatever you deem appropriate." That quote is now being cited as a proof of political confusion or even abdication during one of the most serious India-China confrontation in decades. Now, I don't want to get into the political debate, but to understand that movement, you have to look not at what happened on the night of August 31st, but what had already happened before it. And that is where the real story lies. By late August 2020, Eastern Ladakh was already a live theatre. The Galwan clash in June had killed 20 Indian soldiers. Trust was broken, and crucially, the rules of engagement at the line of actual control had changed. As the print reported that time, according to the new rules, army commanders will have the full freedom to put in use any instrument under his command for tactical operations as deemed fit. This was not business as usual. Yes, now I can say, as General Naravane's extracts reveal, that the ground troops were allowed to open fire if their lives were under threat. Of course, the rule was that only those engaged in direct confrontation will open fire if deemed fit, and not any others posted anywhere along the LAC. At that time, I was aware but did not report on this particular aspect because I was told specifically not to. Even when I did this story, I was very well aware of the fact that this is what the new direction says, but we left it ambiguous because the operations were still on. Now, India was preparing to respond, not defensively, but tactically. The earlier remark that has been spoken about came after General Naravane informed the political leadership that the Chinese People's Liberation Army (PLA) had moved tanks and troops towards Rechinla, a mountain pass along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh, and were inching closer to Indian positions. Excerpts from Naravane's books were published by news agency PTI in December 2023. The memoir is yet to be released pending clearance by the Army, a mandatory requirement for books dealing with operational matters written by serving officers or veterans. At 20:15 hours on the evening of 31st August, Joe rang me up, General Naravane says, quite worried. He reported that 4 tanks supported by the infantry had slowly started moving up the track towards Rechinla. They had fired an illuminating round, but this had no effect. I had clear orders not to open fire till cleared from the very top. A flurry of calls followed between the RM, EM, NSA, CDS and myself over the next half hour. General Naravane writes, describing how the then Northern Army commander, Lieutenant General Y.K. Joshi, informed him of the Chinese movement. The excerpts have since become a political flashpoint, with the Congress raising the issue in Parliament. At Rechinla, the Chinese move had led to the firing of the first shots along the LAC in over 4 decades, breaking a long-standing understanding despite unsettled boundary witnessing frequent face-offs. An illumination round and a rocket launcher were fired at a mountain peak as warnings, followed by several rounds fired into the air to deter the PLA's advance. The Chinese had fired first, also in the air, in an attempt to intimidate Indian troops. However, while attention has largely focused on the events of 31 August, the most significant story lies in what unfolded before that night, a context not fully reflected in the excerpt so far. The PLA's attempt to move light tanks and troops towards Rechenla was aimed at capturing heights already occupied by the Indian soldiers. It was an attempt to capture the heights from Indian soldiers who had outwitted the PLA and occupied the critical heights earlier, much to the surprise of the Chinese. As first reported by ThePrint in early hours of 31st August 2020, following operations conducted during the intervening night of 29 and 30th August and through the day, the Indian Army carried out Operation Snow Leopard to capture key features along the southern banks of Pangong Tso. Snow Leopard was also the name of the border operation launched in May 2020 following the Chinese aggression in eastern Ladakh. The overall operation was known as Snow Leopard. The August operation was a direct outcome of the Galwan clash in June 2020, which left 20 Indian soldiers dead and several others injured. Following the Galwan clash, the military was tasked with identifying options to regain the initiative. The Indian Army began working on tactical maneuvering, or let's say quid pro quo, to the PLA's action. While Leh-based 14 Corps remained deployed at multiple face-off points in eastern Ladakh, the commander of the army's only China-facing strike corps at that time was flown in from eastern sector to help draw up contingency plans. This was followed by a series of meetings involving the then army chief, the Northern Army commander, and other senior officers from the army as well as from the government. A detailed plan was eventually submitted to the government and approved. Nearly a month of preparation followed, marked by secrecy, the quiet induction of specialized troops, unorthodox deployments of units, and false flag maneuvers, culminating in the night operation of 30th August along the southern banks of Pangong Tso and in the Finger area. Sources said that at least half a dozen locations along the LOC were identified where Indian forces could gain a tactical advantage over the PLA. Once the plan was finalized, the Panagarh-based 17 Mountain Strike Corps, the Army's only offensive formation oriented towards China, was activated. Multiple units of the elite para-special forces and the Chakrata-based Special Frontier Force, largely composed of Tibetan refugees, were also brought in. While the overall operation was overseen by the Northern Army commander, then General Officer commanding of the 17 Mountain Strike Corps, Lieutenant General Savneet Singh, was tasked with executing the plan on the ground. In early August, with just 24 hours' notice, a small team from the Mountain Strike Corps led by Lieutenant General Singh and without heavy equipment flew to Ladakh. The movement appeared routine with no mass mobilization, ensuring it did not attract attention. As a result, two corps commanders were present in eastern Ladakh, Lieutenant General Savneet Singh of the Mountain Strike Corps and Lieutenant General Harinder Singh, the then GOC of the 14 Corps. According to sources, defensive responsibilities remained with 14 Corps while the offensive operation fell under the Mountain Strike Corps. In a parallel move, the PLA attempted to apply pressure by carrying out a tactical operation on the southern bank of Pangong Tso, managing to occupy two features known as Blacktop and Helmet close to their positions. Indian troops responded with mirror deployments, prompting senior army leadership to give the go-ahead for the Mountain Strike Corps commander to initiate the planned operation. On 30th August, troops from multiple selected units converged while equipment was drawn from separate pools, including mechanized and armored elements. At the same time, India executed another tactical move on the northern bank in the Finger area, leading the PLA to believe that the main focus was there, even as decisive action unfolded on the southern bank. The northern bank ops was also a successful one. The Indian troops had managed to climb up the heights of Finger 4 and station themselves directly opposite the Chinese there, while troops in the southern banks started capturing the heights. On the southern side, Indian specialized elements surprised the PLA and dominated the heights of the Kalash range, an area disputed by both sides. The key objective was Mukpari. While specialist teams secured the heights, regular infantry was rapidly inducted to reinforce positions, establish defenses, and set up logistics. As Indian troops consolidated their gains, the PLA launched its own troops towards the heights. In the race for key passes, the Indians reached first. Until the end of August, neither side had occupied these features. The heights included Rechenla and Rizangla, and the capture allowed Indian forces to dominate the Spangur Gap under Chinese control as well as overlook the PLA's Moldo garrison. Now, what happened on 31st August? Caught off guard by the Indian move, the PLA pushed through light tanks and deployed over 1,000 soldiers in an attempt to retake the heights on the southern bank. India responded by moving its own armored columns forward onto the Kalash range. As General Naravane records, at 20:15 hours on 31st August, Lieutenant General Joshi informed him of the Chinese advance. Over the next half hour, multiple calls followed. At about 21:10 hours, Northern Command again rang up. The tanks had continued moving ahead and were now less than a kilometer from the top. I rang up RM again at 21:25 hours with the latest and once again asked for clear directions. The situation was tense. Telephone lines were buzzing, he writes. General Naravane wrote that the hotline messages were exchanged with PLA commander, suggesting both sides avoid further moves and that local commanders meet at the pass following morning at 09:30 hours. He then called Defense Minister and the NSA again at about 2200 hours to convey this. And he says, I had hardly put the phone down when Joe rang up once again at 22:10 hours. He said that the tanks had started moving up again and they were only about 500 meters away. Lieutenant General Joshi recommended opening fire with medium artillery to halt the PLA advance. General Naravane writes, we cannot be the first ones to fire. General Naravane writes, he told him as it would provide the Chinese with an excuse to escalate and paint India as the aggressors, Naravane writes, adding that even at Mukpari the previous day, it had been the PLA who had fired first, been only 2 rounds by the PLA and 3 rounds by us. It had escaped the attention of the media. Instead, General Naravane instructed Indian tanks to move to the forward slopes of the pass and depress the guns towards the advancing PLA armor. This was done forthwith, and the PLA tanks, which had by then reached within a few hundred meters of the top, stopped in their tracks, he said. Their light tanks would not have been matched for our medium tanks. It was a game of bluff, and the PLA blinked first. Over the following days, China continued provocative attempts to dislodge Indian troops, but the soldiers held their ground without conceding an inch. This is what happened towards the end of August 2020 and early September 2020. For The Print, this is Snehesh Alex Philip. For more such videos, subscribe to The Print's YouTube channel.